So it's a combination of obviously automation to help save on labor costs, but you have to start what you're saying, rethinking the genetics of the crop to work in a fashion that's more friendly to this automation forward environment. And that probably goes beyond apples. You're thinking about apples, but it probably goes beyond that.
Well, this could be applied to almonds. It could be applied to so many different tree fruit crops or any crop. Like it basically kind of redesigning the production system to meet the realities of your cost structure.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is Neal Carter, the founder of Okanagan Specialty Fruits, a company founded 30 years ago with the intention of creating a non-browning apple. He sold the company 10 years ago, and this week he announced he's buying it back as he brings the company into the modern era using newer technologies like gene editing and CRISPR. So I caught up with him to talk about the future of farming, how things like gene editing sit alongside robotics and automation, and where he sees it all going. It was an interesting conversation. I think you'll learn a lot listening to it. I know I did. As always, find more podcasts at the Spoon, and make sure you go to smartkitchensummit.com to register for our free tickets because they're going to run out soon. So, all right, folks, that's it for now. Let's get to my conversation with Neal Carter. Neal Carter, you are the founder of Okanagan Specialty Fruits, which I think you began in 1996, and you started with your wife, Louisa, but you guys have some big news that you guys just bought back the company after selling it 10 years ago.
Yeah, we're excited about it. It wasn't exactly, the plan. I sort of thought maybe when this company sold in 2015 that, that I'd be heading on to more of a retirement path. But, instead I've been busy running the company on behalf of the other owners for this last 11 years. And then the opportunity came up that, they wanted out and we were able to kind of do a management-led buyout of the business, and we're excited to have this company back and to drive it further and farther and faster. Yep.
Well, I've been paying attention to OSF because you guys are the creator of a fairly innovative product in the Arctic apple. And for those who don't know, and I'll butcher this, and you could probably do a much better job explaining it, it's an apple that is essentially, the idea was to create a non-browning apple when you sliced it, and you did that through essentially silencing enzymatic browning.
Yeah.
So you could probably do a much better job, but This was you started this 30 years ago. Were you thinking of that way back when you founded this thing?
Yeah, really the company was a built for purpose company that was designed to create a non-browning apple. We're farmers. We have an orchard in Summerland, British Columbia, and with grow apples and cherries. And, I guess I'm a little bit more than that. I'm also international, ag engineer, bioresource engineer, doing development work and technology transfers all over the world since the early 80s. And so, this was just kind of an extension of where suddenly we became our own clients. And I had identified that in Australia, they had kind of put some patents around the control of enzymatic browning through suppressing polyphenol oxidase, the enzyme that drives browning reaction in apples and many, many other fruits and vegetables. And we've been looking for something like a consumption trigger. How do we make it so we stop the decline of apple consumption? That's really, this whole thing came out of reducing waste and improving consumption of a healthy fruit. And, fresh cut baby carrots and cut and tumbled carrots and salad mixes and things were just starting to become prevalent. It's like, we need to get apples into food service, and we need to do that by controlling enzymatic browning. Kind of how this motto in the company is more apples in more places. And so, more apples we actually able to drive consumption, and more places mean that the apples are easier to use in food service and in other applications than they are today. And that continues to drive us. I think that's been our success, is we had a reason to be created, and that reason still exists, if not even more so today.
So the background in technology and technology transfer makes a lot of sense that you took this very tech-driven approach early on. And so when you were thinking of starting the company that would create this non-browning apple, how did you go about it? I mean, what was the early, did you hire scientists? Did you do the lab work yourself? What was the early
molecular biology is beyond my abilities in science right now. Yeah. So we're lucky. Summerland has an Agriculture Canada research facility, and timing wise, it was perfect because right at the time we were considering this, they had just opened a new biotechnology sort of piece of the building. And so they were looking for, partner projects. And so we approached the director and managed to have a partner project with the Canada facility where we had hired some scientists, and they put some scientists to it, and we created a team, and we got down to work, and really achieved proof of concept relatively quickly, given that nobody had done any of this stuff before. That nobody had done any genetic engineering in apples, and nobody had really isolated polyphenol oxidase. Nor did even once you had done the science, we hadn't even created assays and tests to be able to validate if the apple was non-browning or not and such. And so we covered a lot of ground, made a lot of painful mistakes, of course, and once we had proof of concept, though, in the fruit itself, it was like, wow, this changes everything. Arctic apples are just better apples. It's not that they just don't get enzymatic browning, but they're firmer, they store better, they eat better. They don't have so many of the other apple problems, which you recognize is that enzyme's when it oxidase creates the oxidation browning reaction, it's consuming the polyphenols. So the enzyme uses up the polyphenols to make these brown pigments, and the polyphenols are the flavor, the aroma, really all the good stuff in an apple.
Yeah,
And so what
for
you
sure.
realize is when an apple's stored, there's enough cell wall leakage and enough release of the enzyme that it's slowly going downhill. Even though it looks great, but the flavor's getting reduced and really like things like vitamin C levels are lower and just the apple's just not as good as it was. And with an Arctic apple and that enzyme not being prevalent, you basically preserve all those polyphenols and it has higher nutrition values and it's just a better apple. So it's kind of a very cool double whammy where you get the non-browning, but you also get just better apple quality and better eating quality.
All the good stuff stays in there.
Yeah.
And so when you went out 30 years ago, I imagine telling this story to Apple buyers, people, it was very early days.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
convincing them to do this more tech forward Apple, were those conversations hard? Did it, and I'm sure they're
Oh
drastically
yeah.
different than they are today. Talk about those early days.
Yeah, early days. Well, we at the time we had a lady, really a veteran in produce, working for us, Jen Arman, and Jen used to talk about how she needed to wear a flak jacket because there was pretty strong anti-GMO sentiments out there in the ag,
Yeah.
in the food industry and amongst the buyers. The consumer really didn't know, right? But the gatekeepers were the buyers, and the gatekeepers like, well, we can't have that. It'll leave placards on the streets and all sorts of problems. And it's sort of like we had to spend quite a bit of time from a messaging point of view is like, well, hang on. Our Arctic apples are exactly like the apple you eat, other than that one enzyme is being suppressed. We didn't add anything. And so it's not like we added other genes and proteins and such to the apple. It is the same apple that you'd always eat if you went and got a Golden Delicious, you ate an Arctic Golden. They're exactly the same, other than the fact that ours doesn't have polyphenol oxidase, and so, I think within time, people kind of got their head around the fact that, oh, well, this isn't really so bad because we actually did some consumer research. And that was our aha moment that we said, okay, we can educate people people want a better product and they want to get rid of this yucky factor of apples going brown. And so we think that with some education, we'll get there. And we have, today in today's world, it's very different, of course, but there were a lot of the Apple industry itself wasn't really enamored with us and what we were doing, and they were very concerned about their product having some negative, um, impacts on the Apple consumption and things like that. But it's a branded product. We don't commingle with other products. When people buy Arctic, they know it's Arctic. We've made a point of being, we see it, of course, as a value proposition, but also make sure that people know what they're getting.
It was an earlier era of biotech back then. You guys used the RNA interference
Hmm.
to kind of suppress that browning mechanism. Now I know that you are exploring and looking at the idea of genomic or genome editing,
Hmm.
kind of more modern tools like CRISPR. Can you kind of differentiate between, what you did and kind of where you see the company going?
Yeah, I think it's, Arctic apples, as they're known today in the marketplace, are all created using RNAi, gene silencing approach, which is considered genetic engineering, makes it a GMO. In today's world, we would tackle the same problem using genome editing. We'd use making a nuclease of some sort, a CRISPR type tool to cut that gene. And really, the big difference is with genetic engineering, the 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 thing that you do, that you introduce, is integrated into the plant. And so what you do stays in the plant. In our case, we turned off a gene, not that big a deal, but it's with the plant. Where genome editing, it's not integrated into the plant. It's doesn't have any sort of DNA changes in the DNA. It goes in, it cuts a targeted strand of DNA, and then it's gone.
The scissors as a metaphor,
Yeah,
right? Like
that's
it's
right.
kind of,
It's
you're
kind of
cutting
like
it out.
when you're doing your word processing, you go in there and you edit that word, and everything else stays the same. It's the same, but it's extremely targeted because you have to remember apples has 75 million base pairs of DNA, and we're targeting 22 at a time. And that 20 strand of 22, which is sort of the guide that steers it to where you're taking it, we're targeting a specific spot, one spot within that. So it's very, very targeted, specific, and already it's the concept that when the apple DNA is transcribed into RNA and the RNA into protein, if we can go and interrupt that process and make it so that there's a break, basically the DNA has cut. And when it gets cut, it then makes a sort of a blunt end repair. And so when it gets read, it sees this and says, oh, there's a problem with this. It skips over it. And so that doesn't get turned, ultimately doesn't become a protein. So it's a way of sort of making the plant not produce the protein you don't want. And, we've gotten pretty good at this. We can actually have 6 different targets at one time, in and as we work on it. But I'll be honest, the genome editing is everybody's a bit in love with it because it's this tool that has an easier regulatory path. It's actually very difficult to do. It's easy to do, hard to recover plants from. I think that's the easiest way to describe it. It's because most of the time we're working with protoplasts, and a protoplast is essentially a cell that doesn't have a cell wall, and so it's easy to introduce your intervention, make the cut that you're looking for. But now we need to recover a shoot from that, so we sort of have to put the cell wall back on and get it so it's dividing, and then actually have it generate some callus to produce some shoots. And that is difficult. So it's been the overwhelming challenge, I think, for plant genome editing work in plants. And fortunately, we have a talented science team, and they've been able to figure this out in some crops that are very difficult to work with. So, kind of makes us pretty much unique on the planet that we're doing this in apple and have had great success. So all the next generation of products will be genome edited, and they'll be targeting not just enzymatic browning, but other traits, nutrition traits, uh, disease-resistant
And
traits, that sort of thing.
and are you looking beyond apples as you retake ownership of the company again? You have this science team that you've built out to with expertise in gene editing. What are you looking at in terms of expanding the product line? Other types of fruits? What are you looking at?
Yeah, it'd be great to work with something that's easier, but it doesn't seem to be what happens. We seem to always be pulled towards the more difficult ones. But the company has experience with 20 different crops, and so it's as much as we're seen as the apple guys,
Mm.
we've spent well of the 30 years we've probably spent 26 of these years working with in cherry. We've also worked in apricots and peaches and blueberries and grapes and avocados and tomatoes, lettuce, bananas, all sorts of things. And so we will definitely be working in other crops. We obviously have some partnered projects underway now that we are working with other crops, but they won't be like the Arctic apple is really sort of a product we built and took to the market and are commercializing it all on our own. In the future, we would prefer to have a partnered project where the partner has the access to the sort of germplasm we want and need to work on, and they also are the commercial vehicle. So they're the ones that lots of times we can be their breeding program. They can bring the germplasm to us. We can create the new product for them, turn it back, and then they take it to market. And
Mm.
because we recognize we can't do everything. We have to be.
Yeah.
This is a very challenging science, and you have to be very focused to get to the goal line.
And you are essentially now a vertically integrated company. I mean, oftentimes when you look at companies, there's scientists or the seed companies that are doing a lot of science. You have the farmer, you have the go-to-market brands. You're pretty vertically integrated. Is there a reason why you're choosing to do so much?
Um, I think it was. I think part really. So when the company got bought in 2015, one of the first meetings we held with our new owners was us all getting together and said, Neal, we want to become vertically integrated. And I
Okay.
kind of choked on that, going, "Oh wow, that's a lot." Um, but
Hmm.
it made sense because at the time there wasn't partners weren't as prevalent. We had to
Yeah.
validate the technology and the science and the product and the value proposition, and there were so many things still to prove. So maybe we really didn't have that much of a choice in those days, but to
Mhm.
become vertically integrated. But the vertical integration was done at a scale that is a we're a large company. We've done this at a lot of scale. We have 1,500 acres of Arctic apples, 1,258 acres of which are planted. The rest are roads and headlands and bin loading areas and such. But that's a lot of that's 85 million pounds of apples ish a
Wow.
year.
It's a lot of apple.
So it's quite a few apples, right? And so we, it's not like we just sort of vertically integrated a little bit to do this. We made the commitment to do this at scale and to demonstrate the market differentiating capabilities of Arctic apples, and to validate this technology can create that opportunity. And I think this is what creates interest in our company, from
Yeah.
global interest in our company, is that we've done something nobody else has done. We've done it at scale. We've kind of learned as we go and figured out, how to do this, not just the science, but the pre-commercial piece, the commercial piece, the messaging, the marketing, the sales, all of it. And so yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and we're not done, because I think we're very well positioned right now to do this in a lot of crops and to help companies succeed in bringing their next dream product to market.
You wrote a white paper last year that talked about the farm of the future. And I focus a lot on agriculture because I help run the agriculture programming for the Consumer Electronics Show. And so a lot of the talk there, because it's the CS, is about robots. And you talked about how the future of farming isn't just robots, it's also new types of crops. Can you talk about like what you see the vision of the future farm looking like?
Yeah, I think just to touch on that, it's not robots. We are we've adopted an awful lot of ag tech on our orchards, all right? Like, we are
Sure.
an early adopter of technology, full stop, whether it's genetics or otherwise. And so one of the reasons for the white paper and us releasing that as we were doing a sort of an ag event, tech event at our orchards last year, was the fact that I firmly believe that ag genetics is part of ag tech, right? Like,
Mm,
people have to recognize that starting with the right genetic material can make other ag tech, that tech more successful. And so in the farm of the future, really what drives that is, like, I think, WSU did a paper. It's an ag economist, a lady, I can't think of her name right now, but she did this paper, was published in the Good Fruit Grower magazine in the winter, I think, of 2024, 25, and how 99% labor costs represented 99% of your crop return. And so, like, if you were paid $200 a bin, it cost you $198 in labor to produce it. So
mm.
we have a problem, because you cannot everything else can't be done for that 1%. All your
Yeah.
ag chem, you have a lot of opex that you've got to worry about. And so the fact that in Washington State particularly, the labor costs are ridiculous. The and labor constraints, having to pay overtime only 40 hours a week, because farming's not like everything else. And if you're paying $20 an hour for your labor. It used to be 10, over the last 10 years, it's gone up by $10. But on top of that, now you're having to pay overtime for anything over 40 hours a week. And you have just, extra costs everywhere. Paying,
Yeah.
you've got medical benefits, and I'm not saying that these people the workers don't deserve that. The market isn't willing to pay enough for the product to do that. So let's recognize when you get $500 a bin, everything's great. You get $200 a bin, you're losing your shirt. And the Apple industry's been on a downswing for 7 years. I think this is the seventh year now. Something has to change. Big companies are going broke every week. Another one going under, and so, I think the white papers are really about, okay, recognizing the reality of like labor is going to be expensive. These rules aren't going to change because rules aren't made for agriculture. They're made for everybody else. So what are we going to do about it? We've got to get rid of labor. We need to create a pedestrian type orchard with a very constituted fruit zone that gets rid of platforms, gets rid of people, gets basically autonomous equipment is going to run this orchard. And the grape industry is already more or less there. Sure, people are doing stuff, but if you wanted, you could go in and do everything mechanically. And you know how we do that. See, for us, the problem is that apples grow on new wood, or don't grow on new wood. They flower and fruit on last year's wood. So the idea being is that you know, pruning represented huge costs in an orchard. And I'll just give you an example. Like pruning was about a $1,500 an acre cost for us when you're trying to grow a premium apple. As we went to Arctic apples and sliced apples, we decided we had to mechanize all of our pruning. We brought it down to a cost that's more in the $100 range, $100 to $300 range, depending on just what we do. So huge savings. But the idea of the fortune of the future is that, like a grape, you would create basically a permanent structure, but then from those buds, that scaffold that you'd leave behind, you would grow new wood. That new wood would be like a grape again. So you modify the genetics of that apple so that it would produce a flower and fruit on new wood. And then the idea being is that if you want it, you can either your mechanical harvester can go along and straddle these small rows and just suck the apples off, or you could literally cut that and harvest it and put it all off and deal with the branches and the things at the
Yeah.
warehouse, right? But but you could literally go and cut everything back to those uprights. You leave these uprights on, and you just use a knife and just cut it all off. And so your
So,
pruning costs would be like mowing costs. They'd be $10 an acre.
so it's a combination of obviously automation to help save on labor costs, but you have to start what you're saying, rethinking the genetics of the crop to
Mhm.
work in a fashion that's more friendly to this automation
Yeah,
forward environment.
basically.
And that probably goes beyond apples. You're thinking about apples, but it probably goes
Oh, yeah.
beyond that.
Well, this could be applied to almonds. It could be applied to so many different tree fruit crops or any crop. Like it basically kind of redesigning the production system to meet the realities of your cost structure. And so you just have to kind of look at those two sides and say, okay, what price point do I need to get to? What's my cost per pound? What have I got to work with, and so that I can sell for X and know that it's going to cost me Y, and I'm going to have a margin in there that's going to allow me to survive. Because right now there's just everything's negative. Your negative margins. You're going in the hole. A big warehouse is trucks pull in, they load it with 1,000 cases of apples, and they're losing $2.50, $2.75, or even more on every single case. I think, wow, that's pretty dumb. How do we get ourselves in this mess? And so, this is the reality, and we have to do something. And I guess we've looked at it hard enough as a company and say, well, it's not just sort of tweaks around the edges. We need a whole new production system. And we have robots already that have been designed to pick apples, but they're very slow and they leave 30% on the tree. And so, you're not going to go back and hand pick 30% of the crop. That's a waste of time. So it's like, clearly the robotic harvest technology is moving too slowly. We need it now. And so, one advantage of an Arctic apple is it doesn't show enzymatic browning. So if you make a few superficial bruises or things they don't show, you literally could just go suck all the apples off the tree. Have something that straddles this very concentrated fruit zone. The rows are only 4 feet apart. It isn't a great big piece of equipment. You could have 10 of them out there working at a time. They're all autonomous, and they just straddle that small trellis and suck the apples off and run them into a bin. Done. And
A,
something like that.
a fully realized modern farm that combines this modern vision of automation plus architected from a gene perspective produce. It seems like we could probably produce a lot higher volume of consumable produce, whether that's apples or maybe other types of even vegetables. Do you think that in your conversations with people outside of your company, is this a vision that's starting to take hold? Or are you just kind of like, or people see you as kind of the wild scientist with this vision? Or is this something that's going to start taking seed from a vision perspective outside of your company?
Yeah, it's just Neal being talking stupid again. But I think that people thought that when we talked, we developed the Arctic apple, and they said, no, that's what's the point and all that kind of stuff. And now they realized it's just taking over, right? It just has the opportunity to take over the entire apple industry. Like if you can make an apple that goes brown, why would you make one that did go brown? Literally, why? Who wants an apple to go brown? And then it's the same thing. If you're going to be an orchard business and operate a large warehouse and be shipping apples all over the continent or world even, and you can do this with very little labor, why would you have 5,000 workers coming up from Mexico every spring to do this for you? The headaches around all of these, the labor camps, the work, having beds for everybody, and buses, and we do this. Okay, we have 90 beds for 96 guys. We bring 96 H2A guys in for harvest and all that stuff. But it just simplifies the production headaches that you have. Farming already has enough headaches in weather and all the rest, and it really simplifies the whole production system. So I think there's people listening because I guess there's some people recognize that you don't just take the time to write a white paper. It's a lot of work. I don't have all that extra time. I was really trying to, and it may not be perfect. It's an idea, but let's start with that and see where it gets us.
It's interesting because I wrote a paper for ReFed, which is the food waste advocacy organization that you're probably familiar with because you designed the Arctic apple to reduce food waste to a certain degree, and when I was writing the paper, kind of the farthest out era of AI powering food waste reduction was this idea of kind of creating our food and kind of rethinking it to reduce waste. And a big part of that was looking at gene editing. And in my conversations with folks like, Bonnie Estes, for example, she talks about how farmers and people in ag are starting to think about using AI or are using AI to accelerate gene editing. I mean, you talk about how many million base pairs there are to sort through that data and to use AI to kind of help you push faster in that.
Oh, we are for sure.
Are you thinking about that? Are you guys using that already?
Well, actually, we are, but also like our bioinformatics software, the Genius software that we use for bioinformatics, it has an AI copilot component to it, right? And so, yeah, clearly these are very complicated, very large data sets. It's exactly what AI does extremely well. And it's sort of like data mining at a big scale. And so yes, absolutely, AI will help us design guide string RNAs. It'll help us design nucleases. All the bits and pieces we need to do genome editing. It's sitting there in the back, supporting decision making and kind of looking at different options and that stuff. So yeah, it's really a cool tool for this, and we've been using it actually a long time. We use a lot. In the orchard, we have vision systems, and variable rate fertilizer sprayers, variable rate, air blast sprayers, and those data sets get massaged by AI, and then they get uploaded into the equipment, and so it's basically got a map of the orchard in it, as it moves along when it turns nozzles on and off or belts on and off to move fertilizer stuff. These are all very, precision ag type equipment that is relying on our ability to digest a lot of data. And again, AI is a good tool for that.
I mean, one thing you can't speed with digital technologies is just nature is nature, right? I mean, obviously you could go in and do gene editing, but there's still like it takes a while to produce just a new fruit, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Everything takes a long time.
So, but has it sped up with all these new tools? Like, if you were to like from kind of
Not
early
really.
work to like produce, so how long does it take to produce a new gene edited or kind of gene modified piece of
It
fruit?
depends. It really depends a lot on whether the production system is there. Like if it's an apple, like we really have apples dialed in. So somebody could come to us and say, Neal, we want you to make a saline tolerant apple cultivar for us. How long would it take? I'd say, look, we would have something in the greenhouse in 2 years, right?
Oh wow.
And but if somebody came to us and said, Neal, like we're looking for some, something we've never done before, some weird trait never heard of in our lives, and in a variety that we've never worked on before, it's like 5 years. Like maybe faster. But if we're talking about getting into the greenhouse and getting, assays developed and getting proof of concept and getting a significant enough of data set to confirm that it's working, yeah, it's 5 years. But still, when you think conventional breeding, these are usually tougher challenges than what you would take on in conventional breeding. And that's a 20-year process. Even with marker assisted
Okay.
breeding, it's probably 16 or something. But so we can now take on some of the world's sort of toughest breeding challenges in difficult species and have meaningful results in less than 5 years. I would say 4 or 5 years. So that's pretty cool. I
That's a
think
big difference,
it's a
cutting
big
it down to
difference.
50 to 25% possibly of what it would normally take.
Well,
Because
and
the
frankly,
world,
some of
the
these
world
things
can't wait.
would never be able to do, right? I never say never, Neal. So it's highly unlikely. These are things that be extremely difficult to do in a conventional breeding approach, just given the nature of the trait that you're pursuing. And so, I think that's the other strength. It's not just faster; it's being able to tackle other problems. I'll give you an example. Like we're working very hard on disease tolerant apple cultivars right now, and we've done 3 years worth of genotyping and phenotyping, and they have 4 genes that are being manipulated to create these, or to make a robust disease tolerance. And it's like, if you went down the path of trying to do this, you'd go find the landrace wild type or whatever that had the trait, and then you'd breed it in. But tackling 4 of these and trying to get them all into one place, and that's a lifeline project. But so you're able to take on some of these difficult things and hopefully have success.
So going from founder to selling it 10 years ago to buying back the company, it's like you kind of bought back your startup in a sense.
It feels like that a
Are
little
you
bit.
working? Yeah. Is this something where, how did this come about? Did the company did you just say, hey, I think we could do something interesting? Did the strategic visions diverge a little bit? And did you get outside money to kind of help this happen?
Um, I think the owners have been incredible in enabling the business growth and all the rest. And about a year ago, I think what happens is in a home office environment, things change, and they about a year ago they approached us and said, Neal, we'd like you to do a management-led buyout. It's usually the other way around. Usually the management team asks, but they know it, and it's like, and I guess it was they really are we interested in that. And so we looked at it pretty hard, but we didn't have the wherewithal financially to be able to do that. Um, and but it was so they went down a more conventional path, and I think they recognized that this company had very specific, kind of very unique. Didn't kind of fit in any one niche very well. Being vertically integrated tends to do that a bit. Um, so we were basically going, we were running the company and growing the company and doing what we do, and they were doing what they do. And but about, I don't know, really just 5 6 weeks ago, not very long ago, it became apparent that management led buyout was probably the right direction to go. And we were fortunate to be able to put the deal together. Right now, my wife and I are the sole owners of the business, but we do plan to bring in other investors because, frankly, we can't afford to own this company for very long if it's just us. We can't take it where it needs to go. I'll be very frank,
Yeah.
and I think that we're not going to race to do that, but we're very fortunate to have people I know and we know, I guess, as a family and that are going to help. They've already committed to helping, and I think there's already that press release that went out. It was been interesting how many people. It's been a lot of outreach, and I have to say I'm very, very proud of the fact that the outreach has been very positive and it's been very encouraging because it is a bit terrifying getting the company back because when we sold it, we were like 12 people, and when we buy it back, we're like 160 or 80
Wow.
people, and
Wow.
it's
That's a big
a
company.
different thing, right? We've got an orchard that's has to be go through harvest in October, and that costs a lot of money, and pick 50,000-60,000 beds of apples. Um, so we're making plans now, and we'll be continuing to raise capital and really focusing on partnered research as well as getting the sliced apple business as lean and efficient as we can get it, as well as continue to grow that business. And we have some great opportunities in front of us right now that this is the season. It's the slow season for apple consumption because schools are out and there's summer fruit. But it's when you get contracts get awarded by a lot of the food service QSRs, convenience stores, distributors, and all these people, as well as school districts. And so it's been great to see, what the next school season is going to look like. And we're excited. We're very excited for some big wins there. And then the cider business that we created a few years ago this is really growing into its own, and it's summer, and so the cider business, this is their season right now, right? And so they're going like a storm, and so that's Endless Orchard Cider is what it's called, and we are launching a 19.2, which is the single serving can. They're getting filled literally as we speak right now, and they're going to be at the distributor by the end of the week, and they'll be in the marketplace next week. And so that'll be cool to see. Great timing. Wished it was a month earlier, but these things happen, and so there's lots going on, and a lot of a lot of everything. A lot of visitors coming to the lab because they want to talk science. There's a lot of people wanting to come to the facility to see how we, the highly automated our slicing facility is and all the rest. And then at the orchard, people are blown away by the fact that our cost per acre are $10,000 an acre less than probably the industry standard in Washington. So they want to know how we do that. And so, yeah, we're pretty proud of where we're at.
Is your conversations with other growers and them looking at what you're doing, are you kind of an open source book in terms of hey, we're able to kind of, in a sense, you wrote that white paper, so you gave kind of a roadmap, right? Are you kind of welcoming and you want the industry to kind of learn from what you're building?
Absolutely. We had an ag tech event at the orchard on May 21, so just a month ago. There were 17 or 18 different ag tech vendors there. About 210 people came out. We are an open book. We are very transparent in what we do. We've always been a very transparent company because you know what? We want change. We want the industry to survive. We want people to be able to assume that the great produce is going to be available to them, and and that we're going to overcome challenges of climate change and everything else. And so I think, do we tell everybody everything? No, but that's probably because it's technical enough. Most people wouldn't understand it, but also the fact that, I think that we're on a leading edge that's probably beyond, like, we're not concerned with sharing what we're sharing because we are on to the next thing.
Well, that's great. And so if people want to find out more about what you're building, they just go to your website. They can probably find a lot about it online, and there's a white paper they find as well, right?
Yep, white paper's there, and there's contact info and everything else. They're both the Okanagan Specialty Fruits site as well as the Arctic Apple site. So there's all sorts of great resources there, and I think we have a info at line, and so if there's more specific questions, please just reach out. We like people asking questions. We like answering questions.
All right, Neal Carter, thank you so much for spending time with me, man.
That's Michael.
Well, that was it. My conversation with Neal Carter, talking about his journey from the 90s to today and where he sees the farm going with automation and gene editing at the center of it all. We'll be back next week with another podcast, so stay tuned and we'll talk to you all soon.
If you enjoyed this episode, why not share it with a friend? And don't forget to give us a 5-star review. You'll find more content like this on thespoon.tech/podcasts.